Hey, we're talking about momentum, and if you have your workbook, hopefully you do, on page 4, there's some fill in the blanks. The reason we do fill in the blanks is not to insult your intelligence, but so that we can cover a whole bunch of stuff faster. And I'm going to fly as fast as I can through these notes because I just want to kind of download the content, do a few minutes of Q&A. If you ask a question that we're going to answer in another session, or I'm going to say, hey, I don't want to answer that question now, Craig's session answers that, or we'll come back to it later. But we want this to be as interactive as possible, and we really just want to say, here's a whole bunch of stuff we've learned. We don't know everything, but here's all that we know about these subjects. Momentum at the top of your notes is kind of my made-up definition for momentum because it's primarily a mathematical formula, essentially, or it's found within the context of math. But when we talk about momentum, it's this. It's forward motion fueled by a series of wins. It's the forward motion that you feel as a leader in your organization fueled by a series of wins. And if you've ever been in a department or division within your organization or in a church that has momentum, you know what it is even if you can't define it. You know when you have it. Things are easier. Your problems have to do with we need more seats. The problems have to do with we need a bigger building. Your problems have to do with we need to build a bigger area for our student ministry. The problems have to do with managing crowds and growth. And what are we going to do with all this money? Actually, we've never had that problem, but the momentum is everything, the rock is rolling down the hill and you're just trying to keep up with it. You know what I'm talking about? And if you don't have momentum, you know that as well because everything's difficult. Everything's a little bit negative. All the meetings, everybody walks out with a frown on their face and it's just problem after problem. And they aren't the good kind of problems, they're the bad kind of problems. And so, several years ago, I began to ask the question, because I've been in environments with momentum, without momentum. It is a drag to try to lead in an organization that lacks momentum, but there's some things that are good about a lack of momentum we'll talk about in just a minute. But the thing that kind of drove me to this topic was to ask the question, what if there are things that we can learn from any organization that experiences momentum? What if we took those principles or those insights, and what if there's a way to leverage those to create momentum in a division or department, a business, a church, a group of churches that lacks momentum? And so that's sort of what sent me down the road on this this pursuit of insight to say, what if there's things that we can learn about these organizations, bring them into the areas of our church or churches that lack momentum and begin to apply those? What if there's things everybody has in common? Now, if you're a business leader or if you've come out of business into ministry, you know that background. When a business, and this is why this is important for church world, when a business lacks momentum, because the bottom line is income, which it should be. That's the point of business. When the money's not coming in, businesses are generally quick to make changes that they think are necessary to get things going and to create a sense of momentum. The problem in the church is this, that in the church, the bottom line for us isn't money, or it shouldn't be. So unfortunately, if there's a lack of momentum in terms of ministry, but there's enough money to pay the bills, nobody gets concerned about the fact that there's no momentum in terms of ministry. When's the last time you baptized somebody? I think it was 1978, I think. But we're paying all our bills. In fact, we got extra money because 4 people died and left us a bunch of money, so we're cool. That's extreme. But you see the point that as long as churches can pay the bills, generally not we specifically, but generally church leaders aren't really that concerned about a lack of momentum because, hey, we're paying the bills. In the business world, people start losing their jobs. They just make quick changes oftentimes to gain momentum because at the end of the day, if there's not a profit, they're in trouble. Now, I'm not arguing in our talk that the church needs to think like a business in terms of profit, but here's what I am arguing. If we were as concerned about what we say we're concerned about, which is the mission of our church, mission of your church, the vision for your church, whatever that might be, if we were really, really sold out to whatever it is your vision is or your mission is for your church, and there's not momentum, it should bother us more than the business down the street that lacks momentum, that's willing to do all kinds of extreme things to create financial momentum. We should be more bothered than marketplace leaders. And we have marketplace leaders here today who are Christians who would say absolutely. In fact, one of the reasons marketplace leaders don't like church is because they don't think church leaders take their mission all that seriously. Because they know in the marketplace what they're willing to do, the changes they're willing to make in order to create momentum in their organizations. And they come to our churches and say, wait a minute, you're telling me eternity's at stake? You really believe everybody lives forever somewhere? Well, then why the heck are you so content to just sort of plod along if what's at stake is what you say is at stake? It's easy to make excuses for lack of momentum. Here's 3 I wrote down. Well, if my church was just in the same area, if I was in that area, we'd have momentum. Well, if I had her on staff, I guess we'd have momentum too. Well, if I could communicate like that, or if we had a preacher like that, I guess we'd have momentum too. And if I had a building like that, I guess we'd have momentum. The problem is, whatever your excuses are in terms of personnel or facility, then you turn around and you hear about some of these church plants that are some in this area that overnight you've got 100, then 500, then 1,000 people. And there go all your excuses because they had no staff, they had no reputation, they had no facility. So what is it that allows certain organizations or ministries to create and maintain momentum? Last thing before we jump into the notes. One reason this is so important is if you, and I don't even know how to say this as strongly as I think I should because of how important it is, but if you have momentum and you don't know why, you are just one stupid decision away from destroying your momentum. Now, in church world, here's how we cover that. We say, well, God's just blessing. God's just blessing it. Now, I don't know why. It's just you give all the credit and the glory to God. And believe me, I'm all for giving all the glory and the credit to God. But if you have something great going on in an area of ministry in your church or in your church in general, you owe it to yourself and the people who are following you to discover, where is this coming from? You need to understand it. It's not spiritual to say, well, we're not going to do our homework. We're just going to give all the glory to God. And to be honest, and I don't want to talk too much about this, it's a little arrogant. And here's why. Because essentially what you're saying is God's just blessing us, but God isn't blessing them or them or them or them or them. We have momentum because God has chosen. He said, who's the holiest leader in the city? There she is. Let's penalize all. You see, it's a little arrogant to just say, well, it's just God chose us. What can we do? So it's true. Here's the thing. It's true that in your church or in a division of your church, God is blessing. The question is, what is he blessing? And is it possible to take that thing or that principle or that thing you've discovered or accidentally bumped into, is it possible to take that thing that God seems to bless and to extract it and apply it to other areas of your church or to your church or your church plant in general? If you don't have momentum, this is really important because you want it. And the problem is, we're all guilty of this. In our attempt to try to create momentum, we all do some pretty stupid things. Or we look at what other people are doing who have momentum and we say, well, we think the reason they have momentum is they have like really cool flyers that they mail out to the neighborhood. That's their secret. We're going to try that, and it doesn't work. We think the secret so we guess and we guess and we guess and we guess and we try all kinds of things and spend all kinds of money and embarrass ourselves with all kinds of what we thought were great ideas that we hope nobody ever finds out about because we don't understand momentum. So this is what kind of drove us to begin asking the question, are there transferable principles as it relates to momentum? And so I want to tell you what we've learned about this. I'm going to try to zip through this quick, answer a few questions. But the bottom line is really my main point, Roman numeral 1. 3 components of sustained momentum, and all 3 are important. We're going to talk about all 3. 3 components of sustained momentum: new, improved, improving. That's it. New, improved, improving. New, improved, improving. Letter A under number 1, new. New triggers momentum. New triggers momentum. This is just a fact of life. As soon as you begin thinking about this, you'll see dozens and dozens of applications in culture and in society. New always triggers momentum. Anytime there's something new, there is an element of momentum. It may not last, it may be good, it may be bad, but anything new triggers some kind of momentum. Number 2, anything new by definition generates some kind of momentum. Number 3, the momentum can be positive or negative. Here's some illustrations, and we're going to drop specifically into ministry world. A negative event can create negative momentum. 9/11 is an example of that. A negative event, negative momentum. Airplanes crash into the buildings, all kinds of negative momentum in terms of our economy, the stock market, everything else. A negative event can create positive momentum. Sometimes there's a negative event that creates positive momentum. We've had all kinds of discoveries made in an attempt to solve problems that were a result of something negative. a problem, which is a negative thing, all of a sudden there's all kinds of creativity that pops up around problems, and new discoveries are made that create industries in some cases, that solve problems, that answer questions. If in our lifetime, there have been several national rescues where a child falls into a well or someone gets into trouble, and a group of people come around and rescue that person. And in that community, oftentimes, there's positive momentum that comes as a result of something difficult or something negative. In your notes, the tip is this, that negative circumstances are the fertile soil for a burst of positive momentum. Negative circumstances are often fertile soil for a burst of positive momentum. Many of you walked into ministry environments where nothing was going on. Everything was bad. And when you showed up, things began to turn around. In fact, your story would be, the worse things are, the better the opportunity is for a leader. Because where there's negative momentum, oftentimes there's a negative event instead, a negative event creates the opportunity for leaders to walk in and create some positive momentum. Then the third one is positive event, positive momentum. A city gets a new sports franchise, new event, new sports franchise, new momentum in the economy and the excitement, and the city comes together around a sports franchise. So the point is this, anything new in your ministry, in your church, in your staff, in your city, anything new creates some kind of momentum, which means in an area of your church or your city or your division where you want to create momentum, chances are it's going to require something brand new. In organizational life, number 4, organizational momentum is often triggered by one of 3 things: new leadership, new direction, or a new product. New leadership, new direction, new product, or in our world, a new program. Some of you have experienced this. You launched a new program, and there was a burst of momentum around that new program. New leadership, new direction, new product. Implication number 5, and this is so important, when evaluating an organization or program that lacks momentum, the questions to ask are, do we need a new leader, a new direction, or a new product? Or do we need some combination of the 3? Do we need a new leader? That's usually the first trigger we pull, isn't it? We need a new leader. Let's get him out of there, get somebody new. Do we need a new product? Because you see, if you bring a new leader in and they have to sell the same bad product, no new momentum, right? If you bring a new leader in, come on, I'm talking to the choir. If you're hired as a senior pastor and you're the new guy, but you're given the old system, you inherit an old system, then there's not going to be any new momentum. There's going to be a nice party, and there's going to be 80 new people to see what the new pastor looks like, and his wife, and does she sing, or what is she going to do? There's that whole curiosity thing, a little bit of a honeymoon period. But if there's nothing new, if you've just got to work in the same old system, very difficult to create new momentum. So our tendency is to exchange leaders but do nothing about our systems. That's a different talk. New leader, new direction, or new product. Which of those 3, or what combination of the 3 do we need to talk about? Number 6, momentum is never, and this is the part that your elders and your deacons and they inside your church that aren't staff members need to understand. Momentum is never triggered by tweaking something old. That's what we tend to do. And businesses do this too. We think if we tweak something old and try to make it a little bit better, then whoa, wow. But that's an important part we're going to talk about in a minute. But that's not what triggers momentum. It is triggered by introducing something new. Then I wrote in my notes, this is the challenge facing the established church. Established organizations will always be tempted to tweak the old rather than launch the new. Established organizations, whether businesses or churches, established organizations that have habits. When you go to work, you do the same thing you did yesterday. This is the way we do it here. This is the way we've always done it. This is how we got to where we are. This is what made us a household name. The tendency is to tweak the old rather than pay the price financially or whatever it takes to launch something new. Warning. New does not guarantee sustained momentum, but new is an essential trigger for momentum. New does not guarantee sustained momentum, but new is an absolute, it's the trigger for momentum. Letter B, new, improved, improving. New, improved, improving. Let's talk about improved. Letter B. The new must be a noticeable improvement over the old. The new, whatever it is that's new that you're doing departmentally, divisionally, or in your church or in your city, the new has to be a noticeable improvement over the old. In other words, the people who walk in or the people who hear about it, it's got to be pitched in such a way or marketed in such a way that it's not just, oh, we painted the room red, come and see it, it's going to be, you're going to love it, we redecorated, we've got cool new t-shirts, same terrible program, but have you seen our t-shirts, okay? It has to be a noticeable difference. It has to be a noticeable improvement. Number two, when evaluating new options, this is new programming, tweaks to programming, whatever, the question to ask is this a significant improvement over what we had before? Not is it simply a tweak, is this a significant improvement? It's new, but it's got to be improved, and it's got to be a significant improvement over what we had before. And if the answer to that question is, it's kind of just, version 2 of the same thing, and I don't know that it's that radically different, even though we've got a hoopla about it, just wait. Wait till you can find a noticeable improvement before doing something new if the goal is to create a new kind of momentum. I wrote in my notes, mediocre does not produce momentum. And again, because of budget constraints, because of personnel constraints, because most churches, hopefully not you, but most churches are doing way too much stuff, so unfocused. We got a ministry for everybody that wants to be in the ministry, and hey, that's a good idea, why don't you go do that? You remember that old way of thinking? Hey, that's a great idea, why don't you go do that? We empower our people to do ministry. Terrible idea. You should decide what needs to be done and involve your people in doing those things. Different talk. But because we're so thin and we're doing so many things, it's difficult sometimes to gather the financial resources or the people resources to really make a marked improvement. But if the goal is momentum, that's what you've got to do. It's got to be new, it's got to be improved, and it has to be a noticeable improvement. And then letter C, improving. Improving, number one under improving. Momentum is sustained through continuous improvement. Momentum is sustained through continuous improvement. Now, I brought some illustrations of this, all of which are pretty familiar to most of you except one. The marketplace totally gets this. Totally gets this. These are all household name products. But instead of saying, you know what, everybody uses Scott, toilet paper, so we don't need to improve it. New. Now, can you tell what's new about this? It looks kind of like the toilet paper I've used my whole life, but they want you to look at this and go, oh, no. We've been working on this. We're not content to just have you use toilet paper. This is new. We've been thinking of, not too much, but we've been thinking about this. And now, how do you improve toilet paper? I don't know. But they're smart enough to know we can't just have toilet paper. Scott toilet paper. Your mama used it. Your grandmama used it. We think you'll use it too. They know you won't. So in order to create and sustain marketing momentum, they understand whether it's really new or better or not. They want you to think it's new. They totally get this. There's so many illustrations. Look at this. This is amazing. Okay, everybody knows what Kleenex is. Why in the world would you need to change Kleenex? These are just a few. They're all Kleenex, but they're all new and improved. And here's what this says. We've been working on it. We are so committed to making sure your nose doesn't run off the top of your lip that we are constantly thinking about how to make this better. Now, you already know what Kleenex is. We don't have to introduce you to Kleenex. We don't have to introduce you to children's ministry. We don't have to introduce you to church. But we want you to know this one kills 99.9% of all cold and flu viruses. I don't really think you can kill a virus. I thought a virus was just forever. It's the nature of a virus. But this one's going to kill viruses. I don't know if that's amazing. So, what about this? This is incredible. Look at this. Everybody knows what Crest is. We don't have to introduce Crest. But has Crest been content to say everybody knows what Crest is? And so since you're using Crest, we don't have to talk about it anymore? Look at this. Now here's my point. This has nothing to do with where anyone spends eternity. Now, this is important. But this isn't really that important. But somebody has decided we are so committed to making sure you keep coming back to our toothpaste. We are every once in a while going to repackage it, and we're going to put whitening expressions with cinnamon rush, whitening scope, extreme, cavity protection, which I thought was the whole point of toothpaste anyway, but whitening expressions with wintergreen, whitening expressions with vanilla mint. This is the pro health. So like if you're a pro, I don't even know what any of that means. And you know what? It's not even important that we know what it means. What this says to us is, oh my gosh, they are so committed to their brand, they never leave well enough alone. Now, every mama, every soccer mom, every woman, every wife that does grocery shopping, or every man that does grocery shopping walks to the grocery store every week and is assaulted with the commitment the marketplace has to making things better, 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 better. And if something doesn't work, we take it off the shelf. And then they show up at church. It's like, this is kind of like how it was a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. These products go on and on and on. Ziploc, everybody knows what a Ziploc is, but there's 100 different kinds. Arm & Hammer, baking soda, on and on. But here's my favorite one. They got new Cheerios. Everybody knows what Armor All is. This is the original, but it's new and improved. Original, but it's new and improved. So when I walk by, it's not just, there's a lot of products that compete with Armor All now, so they want you to know, you know what, we're not changing the name, we're not gonna call it something else, but we want you to know we're working on it. We're working on it. We wanna make it better, better, new, improved, improving. This was once new, it's improved, constantly improving. Look at this. This is so funny. Okay, check this out. This is the, here we go. This is the original King James Reference Bible, okay? But this is the New King James Version, which many of you use. Now, when the New King James Version came out, there was all kinds of, and how long did it take us to get a New King James Version? The first one was written when? Remember? 1611. And then they came out with the New King James Version, and people just freaked out. Oh my gosh, you know? Meanwhile, we walk through the grocery store, and everybody else is upgrading. Now, I realize when it comes to a Bible, it's a little bit different. But the point was, when the New King James Version came out, there was actually pushback. Now, that pushback to a new version of the Bible, I think, works its way into our churches. And whereas everybody else who's selling stuff it's important, but it's not that important. They understand once it's new and once everybody knows what it is, it's got to be improved and improving. Improved and improving. Number 2, continuous improvement requires systematic evaluation. Continuous improvement, and obviously that's what's happening in these research development organizations behind all these products. Continuous improvement requires systematic evaluation. If this is evaluation that has to be built into the rhythm of your organization. I'm constantly surprised by senior leaders, especially, primarily denominational leaders, not a lot of you guys who are men and women who are doing all kinds of cool, new, radical things, but in denominational world, how little evaluation is part of the rhythm of the organization. There's almost no evaluation. There aren't even staff meetings designed around evaluation. But the only way for there to be improvement is for there to be evaluation, not random evaluation, not evaluation like, hey, I really like that song, that was a good job today. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about every Monday or every Tuesday morning at 8:30 or 9:30, the group that did the thing gets together to talk about and evaluate the thing. That's the only way for there to be improvement, continual improvement. Number 3, continuous improvement requires unfiltered evaluation. That means people are going to get their feelings hurt. It's God's will for people to get their feelings hurt. If we had been hurting each other's feelings on a more regular basis in church world, the church wouldn't be in the mess it's in. But what happened is we violated, and one day I'm going to do a whole talk on this because I did it for staff, but it's kind of negative, and I maybe save it for my last leadership talk in my life because it really is so negative, but it's so true, so I'll just throw it out because you're a mature audience who can handle this. You always sacrifice the one for the many. You never sacrifice the many for the one. So if the many is your church congregation, or the many is your student ministry, or the ministry is your adults, or the many is your singles, and you have an evaluation meeting, and there sits Wanda, or there sits Philip, and they did a bad job, but we don't want to say, we're not doing that again, that really didn't work, and you did a bad job, because we don't want to hurt their feelings. We sacrifice the many for the one. The Bible teaches you sacrifice the one for the many. That's the point of our whole message, is that Jesus, the one, sacrificed his life for the many. Then we get in a church staff meeting, we don't hurt anybody's feelings, so we don't really do unfiltered evaluation, and then we do the same things that don't work over and over and over and over until we finally just fire Willie and Wanda and everybody and blame it on them, but we never really told them what a bad job they were doing. Okay, now that's a little bit extreme, but the point is, if we're gonna be this committed to our product, and if we're gonna be this committed to our message, then there has to be a place in all of our organizations at multiple divisional levels where we have unfiltered evaluation. And then 4, continuous improvement requires that nothing and nobody be off limits. I wrote this in my notes. If you're not evaluating the areas where you're experiencing momentum, if you are not evaluating the areas where you're experiencing momentum, and I gotta tell you, those are the areas we generally don't evaluate because things are going so well. Wasn't it great Sunday? Yep. All right, what's next on the agenda? Was that your evaluation? Yep, it was great. If you're not evaluating the areas where you're experiencing momentum, the clock on your success is ticking down. Because eventually what works today, it doesn't work forever. We know that. And when you wake up someday and realize this isn't working, you won't know what to do because you didn't know what created the momentum to begin with. And last thing I wrote in my notes, never forget everything you do and everything your church does is being evaluated every week. You know that, right? So why don't you evaluate it? Everybody that attends your student ministry and our singles ministry and your church, they're evaluating all the time. Why don't we? And you know what they do when they give us a bad evaluation? They talk to each other, and then eventually they leave, and we learn nothing because we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Okay, number 2. Here's kind of the practical application. So we got new, improved, improving. New, improved, improving. New creates momentum. Improved, it's got to be significantly better. Improving means we're constantly evaluating, constantly evaluating, constantly evaluating. Roman numeral 2 is applying the new, improved, and improving idea to the world of ministry. So here are just some things to throw out to you as you begin to think about new. How do you do new? Number 1, under letter A, new personnel. New personnel, obviously new leadership, obviously creates momentum oftentimes. And let me say this, if a lack of momentum doesn't bother your current personnel, you have some wrong personnel. And I know that's because that was the guy who works for a senior pastor he's not too bothered by the lack of momentum maybe, I don't know. But if you're working for someone or working with people and a lack of momentum doesn't bother them, then you know that's when you start looking at the people around you and go, just because we can pay the bills, that I don't think that's what our mission is, pay the bills. Number 2, new programming, you know this. Anytime you drop new programming into your ministry, menu or smorgasbord, there's an element of momentum. The problem here is, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, and Craig's going to touch on this, is we have an unwillingness oftentimes to stop doing things. We just keep adding. And you know this, when you start stretching resources thin, it's very difficult to do anything with excellence. And if you're not doing with excellence, it's not going to be a significant improvement over what you were doing before. And it may be a tweak, but it's not going to create momentum. Number 3 is a new season. This is something that we learned early on and we just come back to this over and over and over and over and over. In certain areas of ministry, it's best to shut things down and restart in the fall. And the thing that was so weird when we started doing this, other church people said, but don't you lose momentum? And we say, no, we gain momentum. Because when you shut something down in the spring, or you shut something down after a season, take some time off and relaunch it, the relaunch is experienced as something new. And so you create new momentum. Where we've really learned a lot about this is in singles ministry. We have tried all kinds of different approaches to singles ministry. We've had some great success. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well with some assumptions we've changed about singles. But here's what we discovered. That singles ministry, unlike children's ministry or student ministry or adult married couple ministry, singles ministry has a shorter lifespan than any other area of ministry we do. Whereas the children's ministry, you can run 5 or 6 years the same way and never have to change a thing because parents are dropping them off. If nobody gets hurt or lost, it's a win for the parents, right? Because safety is the number 1 value in children's ministry. I hope they learn something, but are they safe? My kids can quote, all 66 books of the Bible, but they've been lost 4 times and we found them in the park. They're not coming back, okay? Safety is number 1. Now, here's what we learned in singles ministry. The life cycle of effective singles ministry, not the type of ministry, but the grouping of singles, is shorter than any other area. Once we finally figured out the rhythm of the average single and began to program to it, which means we run our fusion groups for a while, then we shut them down. Then we relaunch and shut them down. That cycle is shorter than anything else we do, but we finally found the rhythm of how singles do ministry here. We kept trying to run it like a student ministry or children's ministry, where you just do the same thing for a long time and you treat summers the same as you treat fall. But the seasonality of certain ministries allows you to create momentum. For our Kid Stuff program, which I'll talk about a little bit later too, we just changed that. But for years and years and years, we always shut down Kid Stuff. That's the environment where families come together to do worship on Sunday morning. We shut that down in the spring. People say, why don't you run it in the summer? Our kids have more time in the summer. Because we want to relaunch in the fall. Because our relaunch is a huge creator of momentum. Now, this, again, will fly in the face a little bit of certain ministry models, and you've got to figure out how to apply this in your world. But whenever you can shut down and restart, you have created the opportunity for something new as it relates to momentum. The other example of that is when we, and Craig knows way more about this than me, but when we have churches, we've had a couple of opportunities to come alongside other churches that want to do something different. And the 2 times that we've done this, we've said, well, if we're going to help you, you have to go out of business. You have to shut down. You have to go dark. Now, we'll try to keep your people connected, but you have to go out of business. And they're like, wait, we're going to lose momentum. Nope, we're going to create momentum. Because when we relaunch, it's going to be new. And new creates momentum. Simply tweaking what you're doing and trying to tweak you to the point where you're doing what you want to do, it's too difficult. Go out of business. Go dark. Relaunch. Brand new. New creates momentum. And if it's a significant improvement over what was happening, you'll be able to sustain your momentum. Number 4, a new series. If you're a communicator with student ministry or your church, anytime you do a new series, if you package that right, it creates an element of momentum. A new look, whether it's staging or the building or, anytime you do a new look, there's an opportunity to do something new. New venues. For those of you who are doing multi-campus, you know all about this. Anytime you open up a new campus, what happens? There's new momentum. It can be the same thing you're doing at your other campus, but the fact that it's new, it's a new area. Anytime you open a new service, anytime you open a new auditorium, anytime you create empty seats at optimal worship times, whether they're on your campus or somewhere else, it's momentum. Everything that's new is going to create some kind of momentum. That's how you trigger it. Then the tweaking is what allows you to continue to improve and continue to keep it relevant to what's going on. Under improving, look for ways, number 1 under letter B, look for ways to upgrade your presentations. In terms of the improving part, this part over here where it's crest and it's crest and it's crest and it's more crest, our version of that in programming isn't simply new t-shirts and new colors and new decorations and new stage set. I mean, that's part of it. But part of it is trying to figure out how to do new and different kinds of presentations. Because again, David always kills Goliath every time, right? Can't change the story, And Moses always comes down with 10, not 11, not 9, 10. So the stories are the same. So we're kind of locked into that, which is a good thing, The question is, can we change up our presentations in such a way so that people go, wow, the presentation, they're not going to use the word presentation, but the presentation's better. There's improvement. Number 2, visit other organizations. That's one of the reasons some of you are here. All of us love to go see what other people are doing. We love to go see what other people are doing. In the kinds of churches that most of us are in, hopefully you know this, size is really irrelevant. It really is irrelevant because we're all basically doing the same stuff. And over time, if you do the right thing, you're going to get bigger. And if you stay focused, 10 years from now, you'll basically be doing the same thing you're doing now. You'll just have more people. So size isn't the issue. So visiting other churches of varying sizes is one of the ways that we learn to improve and do things better. Then number 3 is attending, I already say that one? Attending other churches. Yeah, okay. Real quick, let me fill in these blanks for you, then we'll do some Q&A. Momentum stoppers, you know most of this. Letter A, a disengaged leader will kill your momentum. A disengaged leader, a leader who's kind of looking towards retirement. It's hard to get that person to engage in new things. It generally is. A leader who has a hobby ministry on the side. They're a writer and they're focused on writing, or they're being asked to go speak, so they're running around speaking all the time. Good, wonderful things, but they just get a little bit disengaged from the ministry. A disengaged leader kills momentum because Sharp leaders know when a leader is or isn't paying attention to what they're doing. A sharp leader knows when they're sitting in the meeting and they feel like their leader is just kind of biding the time, yeah, let's get through the meeting because they want to get on to what they really want to do. Leaders know that. And you can't create and sustain momentum without great leadership. So a disengaged leader. Letter B, overactive management. Let me talk about this for just a second. There is always in your organization going to be a tension between the managers and the leaders. And that doesn't mean managers can't be leaders or leaders shouldn't manage. But I'm going to polarize these for just a second to talk about this tension. Managers, and the point and the goal of management is to make things the same. That's a system where it's always done the same way, so there's predictability. You have to manage towards sameness, but you lead toward change. So you manage toward sameness, you lead toward change. If you only allow the managers to shape your ministry, eventually everything becomes the same. And it's very predictable and it's wonderful at one level, but it's almost impossible to maintain and sustain momentum if everything is managed to sameness. Now, without managers, there's just sheer chaos, right? And some of you have been involved in churches now where there's explosive growth. And at first it was exciting, and now it's just a little bit too chaotic, and you're looking for managers, you're looking for systems. You gotta have both. We call that around here a polarity to manage. It is not a problem to solve. It's a polarity to manage. That is, how much management, how much leadership. Oh, we're getting a little bit too much the same. We need a little more chaos, too much chaos. We need a little more. It's not a problem you solve. It is a tension you live with, and you learn to live with it within your organization. But if you only manage to sameness, you're never, ever, ever going to be able to sustain momentum, because with momentum comes an element of chaos. And chaos is okay. It's good to have a little chaos. And if you're uncomfortable with that, perhaps you should get somebody else to lead, and you be the second person to help them manage everything back towards sameness, because both are absolutely necessary. You can't. It's not just leadership and no systems. It's not just systems without leadership. You got to have both. I wrote this in my notes, that momentum requires friction. Anything that reduces friction has the potential to reduce momentum. Momentum requires friction. Anything that reduces momentum or that reduces friction has the potential to reduce your momentum. If you get out on a frozen lake and try to run, the reason you can't get any momentum is because there's no what? There's no friction, right? Friction is required for forward motion. So there's gonna be some chaos, there's gonna be some friction, and again, trying to figure out in your organization how you lead and manage and keep both of those things front and center, because they're both absolutely necessary. It's something you gotta figure out organizationally. Letter C, complacency. I wrote in your notes, you rarely regain momentum by simply doing what you did to create it in the first place. Complacency is, hey, this is what we do. This is the way we do it. We're a blank church. We're a such and such a church. This is how we got here. This is what made us famous. This is what made us big. This is what worked in the old days. Complacency is, we're going to just keep doing what we've always done because God blessed it in the past. We know he's going to bless it in the future. You just don't gain and sustain momentum that way. And again, we all fall into this trap of thinking, you know what, if we're lacking momentum, what did we do in the past to create it? Let's go do that again. And that almost never, ever works, because things change so quickly. And then letter D is complexity. Complexity. The great thing about a church plant is there's no complexity. Now, it's hard, but it's not complex, because it's just you and your 2 kids and your wife. It's not complex. We can all get in the car. When you add a couple staff members, you've added a level of complexity, but it's still so very, very simple. But complexity kills momentum oftentimes. And you know this because you've had those staff meetings, and you come back from a conference with a great new idea, and you're the leader, so it's all about chaos, and it's this great idea, but you have a very complex system. So you're holding this great idea going, where do we do this? Well, that room's taken, that night's taken, that day's taken, that morning's taken, that night's taken. We got to do this, but there's so much complexity in the organization, you can't ever get it to settle in, or you finally settle it in, but you have competing systems. Let's do small groups, but they got to go to Sunday school. What about the choir members? Okay, so we want everybody to be in Sunday school except the choir members, because they got to do both services. I grew up in this system. And let's do small groups, but if you're in, so all of those are good things, but they compete for the same resources and the same people. When you have competing systems within your church, and most churches grow toward complexity, which means we all grow toward competing systems. Competing systems and complexity always begin to undermine momentum because the complexity of managing all these things makes me want to turn my back on more chaos because of everything I'm trying to keep going right now. Then lastly is a breach of trust. A breach of trust. You know this. You can have all the momentum in the world, and then you catch your senior pastor, you catch a senior leader stealing money or whatever, and boom, it's gone.